Hello, everyone. Welcome to this monthly webinar on Southwest drought conditions and resources. My name is Joel Lisenby. I'm a Regional Drought Information Coordinator at the National Integrated Drought Information System, or NIDIS. If you're not familiar with NIDIS, head over to drought.gov. You can learn more about us there and what we do and some of the great information we provide. For those of you that are not familiar with this webinar series, we usually try to keep these briefings pretty short. We're aiming for about half an hour, maybe a bit more. These are casual conversations to highlight the current state of the drought across the Southwest and also highlight some of the great work that's being done across the region that's intended to help build up resilience to drought conditions here. I'm trying to move my screen ahead. These monthly 30-minute briefings, they began in 2020 during the Southwest drought that was started then as part of the Southwest Drought Learning Network. These came together from discussions within the drought monitoring and reporting team, and we plan to continue these webinars for as long as there's extreme to exceptional drought anywhere within the Southwest United States. I'd like to acknowledge Emily Elias, the director of the USDA Southwest Climate Hub, and Curtis Riganti from the National Drought Mitigation Center at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln as primary co-organizers of these webinars. So thanks to both of them, they are on the call today. The Drought Learning Network aims to support peer-to-peer learning by linking climate service providers with resource managers and also resource managers with one another in a way that they can share ideas and information that will help increase resilience to current and future droughts. Before we get started, I'd like to go through a few webinar logistics. For this webinar, everyone is muted by default. This webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be made available from the NIDIS YouTube channel and also at drought.gov/webinars. I'll try to get that up within the next day or two. And if you received an email inviting you to this webinar, you'll also receive an email letting you know when I get around to getting that posted. The format for today's webinar is like this. We're going to have two presentations, one by each of our invited experts, followed by a time for questions at the end. The questions will be moderated by Emily Elias, who I mentioned earlier, the director of the USDA Southwest Climate Hub. If you'd like to ask a question, you can do so at any time by using the questions box in the GoToWebinar panel. Now I'd like to welcome and introduce today's speakers. First, we'll hear from Curtis Riganti. Curtis is a climatologist at the National Drought Mitigation Center, where he also does research on observed trends in climate and drought data. He has a background as a meteorologist studying severe storms before he ventured onto the climate side of the atmospheric sciences. In his free time, he enjoys hiking out in nature. He also likes storm chasing, good books, and other things. So thanks, Curtis, for being here. After Curtis, we'll then hear from C. Nell. C is the lead of the USGS Water Data Visualization Team, the USGS Viz Lab. I'll post a link to the Viz Lab when C starts talking. In this role, they create data-driven communication products to engage the public with water science and water data. Their work brings together elements of programming, storytelling, visual design, and illustration to find new and innovative ways to make science accessible and understandable to all. So a big thanks to Curtis and C for being here. We'll go ahead and get started with Curtis's talk. Curtis, I'm going to give you presenter permission. And once you get that, you can just go ahead from there.
All right, thanks for letting me get started, Joel. Can you see my screen? I may not have clicked the right button, so I'm gonna...
I do not see it yet.
How about now?
Okay, yes, I'm seeing it now.
Okay, excellent. Great, thanks, Joel, for having me today and for the introduction. So my intent with this talk is just to do a brief overview of what's going on in the Southwest region in terms of drought coverage, as well as a quick update on the current weather situation, what we've seen over the last few years, and what we can expect moving forward. So my viewpoint on this is going to be more high level. I'm one of the National US Drought Monitor authors, but I'm not from the Southwest. I haven't authored in a couple months. I'm going to coming up here soon. So this is a good opportunity for me to get back into the swing of things on that. So I'll go ahead and share this and then do the swap. All right. So just on a national view to start with, most of the Southwest United States, for areas that are still in drought, which you can see in the warm colors with the progressively warmer colors being more severe levels of drought. We're primarily just looking at long-term drought conditions, which we loosely define as drought conditions that exist on a 6-month or longer time scale. And so a few things to point out here. Much of southern Nevada into parts of southeast California and much of Utah are still seeing some pockets of severe drought, which you see in the kind of orange, burnt orange color, and even a few pockets of extreme drought in parts of Nevada and Utah here. Much of the rest of Arizona and then parts of New Mexico have seen conditions lessen to abnormal dryness, which is the yellow color, or no drought conditions at all, which is white. Then we'll just quickly zoom in on the Southwest so you can see that zoomed in. Also briefly touch on, we've seen some improving conditions in the Hawaiian Islands recently, where none of Hawaii is seeing any drought conditions any longer. We do see parts of the Big Island and a southern tip of Maui still experiencing abnormal dryness. And then just a couple islands in the US API are currently experiencing abnormal dryness. So we'll do a quick look at the current weather situation here. So I just wanted to touch on a few things. We have a few areas of precipitation that are right now ongoing in parts of northern Nevada and Utah, as well as southern Arizona, as we see a pair of storm systems coming in on satellite imagery here, one down here and another that's coming into the West Coast. As we go through the next few days, we have winter storm and blizzard warnings, as well as winter weather advisories blanketing much of the northern and western United States. So we're looking at a pretty active pattern coming up here. As you look at this 500 millibar map, so kind of a middle part of the troposphere, the lowest level of the atmosphere, these big troughs in these lines here, as these swing through the western into central United States over the span of the next week. So you can see one system early this week, another this weekend here in Southern California, and then potentially another next week, at least according to the GFS model. The National Weather Service's Weather Prediction Center is forecasting widespread precipitation in the Southwest over the course of the next several days. This is a forecast valid from Thursday evening into Friday evening, showing some precip starting to show up in the Sierra Nevada and Southern California, and then increasing with the next several storm systems as we go through the next week. So now back to current conditions here. And I meant to start that on a different slide, my apologies. Go ahead and swap this again. So over the last week, we have seen some improving conditions in parts of Arizona, New Mexico, and Nevada, with a couple minor degradations in New Mexico, and then some improvement on the eastern part of the Big Island of Hawaii as well. So really over the course of the last month, our wet pattern that we've seen in the Southwest has become a bit more spotty. We've actually seen some drying over the last month in parts of Utah, Nevada, and California. Well, we've seen more of a mixed bag of conditions in Arizona, New Mexico, and southern Utah. But as we go back out to the last 3 months and from October 1st through now, in most areas, especially parts of the Sierra Nevada and California and some of the high elevation parts of the Southwest, we've really seen unusually wet conditions over this time period, much of this in the form of relatively beneficial mountain snows. And we'll get into what that looks like here. So this is a view of NRCS's snow water equivalent maps. This is comparing the median values from 1991 to 2020 with the current values seen at these different sites. So again, this is looking at a measurement, an indirect measurement of the amount of water that's held up in snowpack at these different sites. Anything that you see in dark blue here, so over really much of our coverage region that we're talking about today, we're looking at least 150% of what the median is from a couple days ago for the 1991 through 2020 period. So after really several years of below normal snowpack, this has mostly been a welcome sight. And again, we're still over the course of the season, still these are pretty good numbers for this time of year. How that looks in stream flow, again, to an extent, stream flow is also modulated by when melt-off starts in different areas and different precipitation types. So I'm not going to really try to analyze what's going on here too much, but And in terms of stream flow over the last 28 days, that's a bit more of a mixed bag of conditions where some sites are above normal, some sites are below normal. Exactly what's going on in the hydrology, I'm not going to try to get too much into here, but wanted to show you that. And we've also, over the last 6 months, we've seen a pretty good improvement in soil moisture and groundwater fields. So this is from our NLDAS model that we look at as part of the US Drought Monitor process. Anything that you see in cool colors here represents above normal soil moisture estimates. And then this is from the GRACE product, which is a satellite-based product. And again, you can kind of see a similar pattern where we see some areas that might still have below normal soil moisture and groundwater. But by and large, we've seen some improvements over the Southwest over the last 6 months. Let's go ahead and flip through these. This is our surface soil moisture product, our root zone soil moisture product, and our shallow groundwater product. So as I've alluded to, especially since the beginning of the water year, and really especially as we've gotten into late November and into December, we've seen widespread improvements in the drought situation in the Southwest. We've seen a few isolated areas that have seen 3 or 4 class improvements in the drought monitor, especially in parts of California, Nevada, Utah, and Arizona over this time period. And we've seen a few Kona lows too that have affected the Hawaiian Islands that have led to large improvements in the drought situation there, which was pretty severe in parts of especially the Big Island, Molokai, and Maui. So we've seen a lot of relatively short to kind of medium-term improvement in the drought situation. So you might be asking, where are we at in terms of making up some of the really long-term deficits over the last 3 to 5 years? So this is our SPI product from the High Plains Regional Climate Center. Anything that is warm colors still suggests below normal precipitation over this period. Again, this is 3 years. Anything yellow or light green is within a standard deviation of normal. And then anything more cool colors represents above normal precipitation. So despite the above normal precip we've seen over the last 6 months or so, especially if you include the monsoon from this past calendar year, we're still seeing pretty severe deficits in precipitation in some areas as you go further back, especially in Northern California and Utah and in much of Nevada. As we jump out to 5 years, you see that to a little bit lesser of an extent, but the similar pattern. So we're still seeing deficits in reservoir levels and in long-term precipitation deficits. And that, when we're talking about still the long-term drought that's existing, that's a lot of what that's reflecting at this point. So this is from the beginning of February, a view of the reservoir storage percentile, or I think percent of median. And this is from the beginning. Key here on the left, and so I just wanted to highlight a few things. We've seen some improvements to some reservoirs with Lake Powell and Lake Mead. We're still looking at less than 50% of median reservoir level heights compared to what the reference period for this is. So we still have a long way to go in a lot of locations to refill reservoir levels despite the recent precipitation we've seen. Finally, a quick closer look at what's been going on in Hawaii over the last 3 months. And we've largely seen a wetter than normal period from late November through the middle of February, which has resulted in an eradication of drought in the Hawaiian Islands. And at this point in the US API, we just have some short-term abnormal dryness on Kapinga-Morongi, Kwajalein, and Woche, with near normal conditions or wet conditions everywhere else. So with that, thanks for your time, and I will happily take any questions you might have.
Thank you, Curtis. We're going to hold questions till the end. See, I've just given you presenter permission. Once you get that, go ahead and share your screen and go for it. All right, we are seeing your screen now.
Okay, great. Thank you for the patience on that. So, hi everybody. I'm C. I use they, them pronouns. I'm the lead of the USGS Phys Lab. we are the water data visualization team at USGS. And this is a team that operates at the intersection of data science and science communication. The main objective of our work is to be able to bring USGS water science to non-technical audiences. And so we do this by creating timely visualizations that distill complex scientific concepts and data sets into compelling charts, maps, graphics, websites, that sort of thing. And so this, what you're looking at right now, this is our portfolio site. And there's a bunch of different things here, but the overarching goal is to be able to contribute to increasing data literacy in and outside the US, and hopefully make science a little bit more fun at the same time. So just do a quick run through of this in case you're interested. This is a collection of past products that we've made. With one of kind of like the cornerstone products that we work on are these interactives, which are interactive websites on different topics or projects coming out of USGS. Our role is to work with different groups, researchers and subject matter experts, to try and help elevate their work and, again, reach the public with science. So you may have seen this water cycle diagram, which is a project we released in the last year that got a bunch of media attention and provides kind of highlighting the role of humans in the water cycle. We also have, if we scroll down, a chart gallery that highlights some of the visuals we make for social media campaigns, and then animations that we make for different events and current conditions like stream flow, groundwater, and hurricanes. Okay, but I was invited here today to share a little bit more about our Snow-to-Flow data visualization website. That's this one right here in the middle. And this is a website we put out almost 2 years ago now. It's actually one of my favorite sites because it was the first project I independently led in my role at USGS. So here's what it looks like. The goal of this project was to provide a plain language explanation of the complexities of snowmelt dynamics and how it relates to stream flow. When we started developing this project, it was early winter, about this time of the year, probably late February, and snow melting and entering the water cycle was one of the major upcoming water events during the year. And so, my goal was to leverage the timing of snowmelt to be able to contribute to the larger conversation about climate change and provide a resource on basic science around snow. The secondary purpose here was also to engage broader audiences, with snow hydrology research at USGS. And I say this is secondary only because while representing our work at USGS was a driving force, to be able to make the site more broadly appealing and Googleable, we wanted to lead with the science and be topically oriented, using our USGS team as supporting details to kind of this bigger picture of science. And so the intended audience was for the general public. We wanted to be easily understandable with, for somebody that has very limited background knowledge. And we also wanted to be kind of like design forward, invest in the aesthetics, make it engaging and reel in the audience. And so to do this, we ended up on this kind of data reporting format that you might often see in popular news to be able to weave together data and text, with the first visual being this kind of flashy snow with the clouds moving as you scroll down. And so I'm just going to kind of walk through some of the key elements and the thought process that went into this to make it appealing to a public audience. The website is kind of set up in a repeated structure where there's 4 different sections that you'll see that have these kind of images of snow or stream flow with a title. Then there's like some explanatory text. Maybe there's some, boxes that can be expanded to provide more detail where needed. And then there's a focal visual in each section that it's centered around. And so first, we're starting with these conceptual diagrams to be able to introduce the topic of snowmelt becoming stream flow. And in each section, that's repeated, there's also repeated concepts within the section. So in all of them, we're touching on snow and stream flow, hence the name Snow-to-Flow. They also elaborate on different aspects of the timing and magnitude of snow and flow. So here you can see, it's showing for a typical year what we might expect for magnitude and timing of snow melt. And then you scroll down, it's making this comparison between years that might have high snow versus low snow and what that consequence here is for stream flow or soil saturation. The section after this one, we mirrored kind of that same structure, but we first introduced data. So here, this chart set with a scroll trigger. So when you reach the page, it triggers an event, and we call this like a scrolly telling approach, where that's the combination of scrolling and storytelling, and you use it these scroll triggered events to be able to paste the information and guide, like guide the user through the data. So here, by having that animation, it's like playing through time and reinforcing, this is how events would happen linearly, and showing this kind of basic chart that's highlighting two key metrics of peak SWE and then SM50 that we're using to capture snow melt timing. And I think it's one worth noting here that putting snow and streamflow on the same chart like this is not necessarily, the dual axes is not necessarily the best practice for data visualization. But when we were designing this page, we were about 1 year into the pandemic. And one thing that really stood out to me at that time was, that flatten the curve data viz that was widespread. It was something that audiences everywhere were familiar with. So I designed this chart as sort of a play on that, because by comparing the two curves here, it's like a high snow year and a low snow year, it was something that the audiences could connect with and help them understand the complexities that are going into these two different dynamics. And then, again, as you keep going, the page increases in complexity. So we see the repeat in kind of the same colors and theme that we had initially, but now this visual is adding another dimension, elevation, to be able to look at snow and flow. We add an element of interaction where the user can turn different layers on and off, or change the layout of the charts to be able to make comparisons for the timing and elevation of snow to flow. If we keep scrolling down here, then the last section here is this map of the Western US that's using the openly available data, SNOTEL data on snow water equivalent across the Western US. Is showing sites that have this 30-year period of record for comparison. And this opens up the page then to a little bit of user exploration to be able to navigate to sites and maybe draw a connection between the audience and the content. Maybe there's a location they're familiar with, or somewhere they've been, and look at what this historic record of data are as far as timing and magnitude of snow. And that's the end of the page. And if you notice here, this was published, this says 2021 water year. Right now, this is something that we're working on updating for the current year that can be used, to show what conditions are right here. We released it initially, with a social media campaign to be able to draw attention to it. And there were a bunch of additional kind of like pair charts that went with it, that like this, that maybe didn't make the original page, but that were part of the process. And so we're hoping to kind of reboost this again this year, and be a part of the conversation. Yep. So there's a couple other kind of drought themed products that my team is also planning to release later in the year as temperatures warm up. And we're always looking for new data sets and ways to help the public understand critical water science. So if you're interested, shoot me an email or check out our website. And thanks for having me.
Excellent. Thank you so much, C and Curtis, for your presentations. We have a little bit of time for questions. So the first question is for Curtis, and it is about the Climate Projection Center's 3-month products. So are you able to speak to the 3-month Climate Prediction Center products and ENSO? And for a little context, we've had wetter than normal winter and then dry the rest of this season. So what is the probability of that this year?
Sure, yeah, I can actually pull that up. If people want to see that product, share it. I'd have to, I think, get permission to share my screen, but I can just kind of talk about it too.
If you have it up, I can give you permission to share your screen right now, Curtis.
I do, yes.
Okay, here it comes.
I don't know what okay. All right, can you? Yep. Joel or anyone, you can see. Okay, cool.
Yeah, looks good.
So for anyone unfamiliar with these maps, so these maps, I believe, are issued monthly and are basically the opinion of whichever forecaster or forecasters drew this, how they think that the probabilities for having, relative to what's normal for any location on the map, how they think the probabilities are weighted towards above or below normal precipitation or temperature for those areas. So basically kind of hedging bets on whether or not an area is more likely to see above or below normal precip or temperatures. So at 1 month, well, actually the question was about 3 months, so we'll jump over to that. So this forecast was issued for the March through May period, looks like 5 days ago. So the precipitation outlook leans slightly towards below normal precipitation over the 4 corners, being more likely to occur than near or above normal precipitation. And then in terms of temperatures, we're looking at above normal temperatures being slightly more likely to occur in basically the TN shaded area over here, and then confidence in terms of above normal temperatures over the course of this period increases as you go down towards the Texas Big Bend region and then into the Southeast United States. They also do this as a seasonal drought outlook. And so anywhere that is in this brown shaded area, drought is expected to persist. If I understand it right, I believe that's as is, whereas the kind of like light tan areas show where drought is forecast to continue to occur, but is likely to improve by at least 1 category. And then anything highlighted in green here, for the period through the end of May, drought is actually expected to end. Anywhere for future reference, this doesn't seem to apply to anywhere in the Southwest region, strictly speaking, but anything in yellow here is where drought development is likely to occur in an area that is not currently in drought. So, and these were released the same day as the 3-month precipitation and temperature outlooks we just looked at. So the forecasters would have collaborated on these outlooks. So.
Great, thank you, Curtis. So it looks like, based on what you shared about long-term drought, that we might still have that going forward. Now, a quick question for C. I really enjoyed seeing your data visualization in that presentation, and I'm wondering if you've gotten any feedback from users on how they've used Snow-to-Flow.
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, I think for the most part, the feedback that I've received has been from maybe teachers or people that are using it to teach kind of the introductory water science topics. And it would be really useful to get more detailed information about how users are using the website, and kind of what value it's adding there. You know, one thing that we do have to be able to track engagement and the use is, like, we've embedded, you know, web analytics into the site, to understand, you know, how far down the page do people scroll, and, like, are they clicking on these features that are added, or you know, what pieces are more popular. And so we use that to kind of improve and iterate on future products. And yeah, I guess one thing we have learned from that is that a lot of users, you know, won't necessarily scroll the entirety of the page, or they won't click on anything. And so we did incorporate that into our initial design of this one, where we wanted to start out with, you know, the most simplified way to deliver the information, provide the conceptual diagrams, and then layer in complexity as you go. So if you don't make it all the way down the page, you're still hopefully getting something out of it, and your choice maybe not to read the whole thing or scroll all the way down isn't because it's too complicated right off the bat.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I can see how you built on, you know, simpler data at first and then built on it throughout. Okay, well, we are at the end of our time. Thanks so much, everybody, for joining us. Thanks to our 2 experts, Curtis Riganti with National Drought Mitigation Center and CNEL with the USGS, for joining us and sharing their knowledge. Thanks also to my colleague, Joel Lisenby, for continuing to co-host these Southwest Drought briefings. There will be a recording of this briefing available on drought.gov/webinars. And our next Southwest Drought briefing will be in March, and we'll focus on or feature CocoRa's the Community Collaborative Rain, Hail, and Snow Network. So this concludes our February Southwest Drought briefing. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you in March.